Good morning, world, and I've had to revise in my mind how I do this because it has been so long since I have presented a solo or a sofa safari. So welcome back to another installment of Tundatula's solo safaris. As I'm sure you've gathered and read, it's become a lot busier here operationally, which isn't giving us guides nearly the amount of free time that we had during full lockdown. So these sojourns out have sadly not been as frequent as we would have liked, but I have got a morning off of my other duties, so I thought why not come and enjoy some gloomy weather and the chance of rain, but it's the things that we do for you to bring you a little taste of the bush. So yeah, we're going to head out there today. I know Luke and Britt did a sofa safari yesterday or the day before, I forget. It was post-rain, I think it was the day before yesterday. We had an incredible start to our rainy season with over 100 mils falling in parts of our concessions, so to over 4 inches. We got just over 2 inches around Tundatula Safari Camp, but we are already starting to see the transformation in the bush. So as we drive around where I see the changes coming, I'll point those out, but let's go see what we can find and show you today. It's been so long I forgot to bring a beanbag, extra camera, all of that. So just pop back into camp to fetch that. But while I'm here, 2 things have caught my eye. One was just on our fire break, where you can really see the effects of the rain sprouting through, literally. Still patchy at the moment, but these are all brand new shoots that have risen up in the last couple of days. If we go to the more established, less mowed grass, you'll see that it's also slowly starting to change. The existing grasses that remain the perennial grasses are now good to go. Their storage organs in their underground root systems are now pushing the nutrients that were stored from last year, using the water, using the sunlight. And look at this, they're all starting to grow already. So considering that we normally only get these changes in November, and we've now received potentially a quarter of our annual rainfall in some parts, no surprises that the bush is popping into life very, very early in the summer. We've got more rain forecast for tonight, and I think we're going to have a very, very green environment in the not too distant future. Combine that with the fact that it is now looking very likely that there's going to be a La Nina event with the Enzo oscillations off the coast of South America that affects global climate, particularly in the southern hemisphere. We are forecast to have a very wet year, or a wetter than average year. So yes, look forward to having a lush green bush very soon. The other thing that caught my eye, all of these sitting over here. These are porcupine quills that tend not to all fall out in one spot like this unless there was some foul play involved. We have looked at porcupine quills, I do believe, on our sofa safaris, but for those that may have missed them, these are them. Porcupines are Africa's largest rodent. They probably stand, well, that's not going to help me showing you, stand a couple of feet high when their quills are erect. But these quills are modified hair. I mean, very, very tough and very, very sharp over here. Contrary to popular belief, they are not able to eject them and shoot them out of their the follicles and impale approaching predators, but what they do is they fit relatively loosely into the skin. This one would have been from the tail and rear region, and the porcupines always present their backside. When the predator comes, it's constantly faced with these pointed, sharp spikes in its direction. The black and white coloration, probably also a aposematic warning color like you get with many of your snakes, your honey badger, skunks. It's warning saying, guys, you can see me, I'm slow, but don't try to catch me, you're going to regret it. And then what will happen is that the predator will come too close, and the porcupine will lunge back and try and impale these, and the quill will stay in the predator, and then the porcupine runs away, and that quill will remain in the predator letting it lick its wounds. Most of the time the predators are able to remove them if it's in a good position, especially around the legs, but occasionally I have seen it where these quills have impaled lions and leopards in difficult to reach places. The wounds get infected. The one case was under a lioness's armpit, and I actually think it may have penetrated the lung because she went from walking around fine to barely being able to move within about 4 days. But looking at how many quills are lying here, I wonder if this porcupine, who is often found around my house, didn't actually meet its end to something, or at least put up a good fight. And crawling over a quill here, we have a little millipede, a very little millipede. I'll try find some bigger ones during these safaris. We colloquially call these shongoloros here in South Africa, and that is a tiny one. I mean, perspective. There we go. I do have big fingers, but yeah, they get several inches long and as thick as my fingers, so we'll try to see if they are out and about after the rain. Okay, so we have a tree. No, it's not that quiet. I'm still by my house, but we do trees, remember that. This is one called, well, remember it used to be an acacia. Now, because of the white V-shaped thorns, it's a Vachelia exuvialis, a flaky bark thorn. You've probably noticed them while we drive. They are just one of the most prominent acacia trees, colloquially used, because of this abundance of very pronounced white thorns. Absolute mass of them. Some pretty thick ones there too. And what happens there is when you have, flock of red-billed Quillers flew over. They are gathering in number. I think we could have a big breeding season. Sorry, got distracted. You'll see some very swollen thorns. Typically they're quite long and thin, but every now and then you get these very very large swollen thorns. Those will often house insects that have injected growth modifying hormones into the thorn, causes it to swell, and then they're able to lay their eggs in there, and they have a wonderful symbiotic relationship with these trees, protecting the tree, giving it a defensive mechanism against other insects that arrive on here to try and eat the flowers, the seeds, or seed pods, and the leaves, and they will actually go and chase them away, probably one of the Cremagaster ants. But anyway, this tree, as you can see, full of thorns, full of flaking bark, but no leaves. And that's how we've got used to seeing them over, the last 5 months without any leaves. But now, a bit of rain, and the very next flaky bark thorn that we come to is getting sprouting green leaves. Now, they will be nutritious, especially now as they're growing, but good luck trying to get these leaves amongst all of these thorns. That's exactly why these trees have them. Just to try and protect their leaves. They don't want to be stopped from browsing, but the presence of the thorns just slows the rate of browsing from the browsers like kudus, impalas, giraffes. And I think they eat at about 1/3 of the pace they would on a tree with thorns versus one without any thorns. This does allow the tree time to build up its chemical defenses, produce the tannins, makes the leaves bitter, and as a result of that unpleasantness in the taste and the potential effect that this has on the microorganisms in the gut, these browsers will then move on to another tree. So it doesn't stop browsing, it just limits how much actually takes place, but at least now there is something to browse again after our rain. That flock of Quillers that flew overhead, and probably others, are just in the bushes up ahead. Still far from what their numbers can achieve, but for this time of year it's good numbers. They're still a couple of months from their nesting season and having these breeding colonies when they gather in literally millions. I mean, we've got thousands here in these small flocks, but still quite a sight to see. To go from the tree to send down into the grasses, and then in this allomimetic behavior, one takes off and suddenly everybody takes off. Even they're swarming. You may have seen videos of kind of like a murmuration of starlings. These Quillers, when they're in big flocks, do the same thing, just flying over in these massive flocks. Hundreds of thousands together, millions together, and they never fly into each other because everyone is responding to movements from their neighbors. And by everyone doing that kind of instantaneously, it has this almost dancing-like effect. And yeah, really just allomimetic behavior, doing what your neighbors do. So yeah, a red-billed queller, the most abundant bird species in the world. More of these guys than anyone else. And yeah, they're building in good numbers, and I'm sure now with the rains coming and the grass is growing, they're going to be quite happy because they are seed eaters. But let's carry on and see if we can find things with 4 legs. I guess you're probably going to have to just call this drive a drive after the rain, because it is now amazing how this rain can transform things. Termite mountains, we've chatted about them, we've seen them, we've felt how hard they are in the past. Come in. It's very characteristic of termite behavior after the rains is to start building and adding onto your mound, and this is exactly what we've got here with this dark, very wet patch of sand. So quite contrary to this very hard stuff, you've got very soft, still pliable mud. And this is what they do. They take the mud from inside these mounds and they bring it to the surface, and then literally grain by grain these termites bind it together with their saliva that has cementitious properties, cement-like properties. So as it hardens or is exposed to the sun and hardens, it becomes rock hard. But you can maybe get an idea of the tunnel network inside of these mounds. And what always flabbergasts me is that these are being constructed by very simple insects, but also very blind insects. The workers haven't got eyes, they can't see what they're doing, yet they're still able to make constructions like this. This is the first edition after the summer rains, a little bit more there, but what you'll get is over time. You can actually see how this would have been from last year, probably. This section still quite rough, and then the older ones, after years of wind and rain and guides poking them, tend to become a little bit more weathered, but very soft now, but this will actually harden soon. For those of you that read my blogs, I'm sure you're so disappointed that I can't show you flowering knobthorn trees, but the good news is that in the period between my last sofa safari and now, the knobthorns flowered, and we had giraffe aplenty in the area. I'll try to find, there's maybe 1 or 2 knobthorns that still have flowers on, but it draws the giraffes in because there's nothing else to eat typically at this time of year, particularly around September, and you now have this tannin-rich but also very nutrient-rich growth of flowers that they move into the area and munch on these knobthorn trees, Senegalia and aggressans. Now they got lucky because you can see that those aren't yellow flowers in there, those are bright green, super nutritious leaves. I've got to learn to talk all over again. And at this time of year, these trees are also going to actually be extending their branches, and it's one of the few times where the giraffes will actually eat thorns. They'll eat the new thorns and new branch growth because those two are full of nutrients, and the thorns haven't hardened too much just yet, so they're still quite edible. Just a male giraffe, but I'll try to find some flowers on these knobthorns. But it's the landscape is so different from what it was even 2 weeks ago. The knobthorns have now kind of either had all their flowers eaten. Giraffes can eat between 80 and 90% of the flowers within their browsing range, so you'd only find these yellow flowers left at the tops of the knobthorns, and then the rest have been pollinated and will now produce the very nutritious pods. More animals with 4 legs. Impalas, looking in amazing condition still. It's been a very easy winter for these animals. But what I want to show is just how the bellies of these females are now starting to bulge. Those lambs inside of them are now 5 months along out of a 6.5 month gestation period. So in a little over 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we're going to start seeing the babies dropping. Belief that they hold off their babies till the first rains are very unfounded. If that were the case, they should have all been dropping now. But You don't push out a baby early, just as you don't push out a baby late. If after 6.5 months the rain still haven't fallen, those babies are still going to be born whether the rain is there or not. You do get variation year on year as to when the babies are born. This is much more likely due to the actual time of conception, which varies based on the full moon. And during the rutting season, there is a peak of mating around the full moon. So if the full moon is early in the rut, babies tend to come early. If the full moon is late in the rut, babies tend to come late. And that will explain the variation in births year on year. But whatever happens this year, the conditions will be perfect for them. There will be enough cover to hide their babies, and yeah, look forward to that. That's in a little over a month. Where has 2020 gone? I know for many of us it's probably been a very painfully slow year, but gee, it just seems to have flown by. Speaking of babies, we're going to be going east, strangely. Hey, I don't get to do this most days these days, so I'm going to take the opportunity to go into my favorite part of the reserve when I can. But also Tumbela, who was very active around our camp in the Shorolumi up until about 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, has now been back in the east, back to the area that she used to reside in and be territorial in, but also the place where she's always previously given birth to her cubs. She was looking quite pregnant on the Shorolumi, and I suspect that she's moved out to the Mashatin to give birth to a new litter of cubs. So we're going to go see if there's maybe any sign of her around. We're also finding now are our little mud wallows of full. So that means there's plenty of water around, soon going to be plenty of food around. Our red bush willows, russet bush willows. Those are starting to flower. I've seen some red bush willows too. So yeah, the food available is on its way. The water's here. And yeah, this bush is about to flourish. What's not going to flourish is that leadwood tree. One of the hardest woods in the world. And elephant has gone and snapped all of the stems of that tree to get to the leaves. Not something we see very often. Normally they kind of leave leadwoods alone, but that one didn't make it. It is still miserable out there, which makes showing this tree very difficult, but the one we also mentioned in our safe safaris. And that is our Scotia brachypetala, the weeping Burbian, and I said how it gets a beautiful flush of red flowers at the start of spring. And maybe against that washed out, pale, boring sky, you can see the red. Let me zoom in. As you can see from the profusion of flowers, there's going to be a huge amount of nectar created. And this is what's going to draw in so many birds. You'll get your parrots, your sunbirds, your green pigeons. And then not only that, the insects that get drawn here are going to draw a host of insect-eating birds. And there's just a huge amount of nectar produced from these flowers that actually starts dripping out of the flowers. And that's where the common name weeping Burbian comes from. The weeping is the nectar falling out of these trees. As a kid, we used to go to sleep out hide at one of the reserves in the north. That's under a beautiful big scotia. But you never went there around September, October. Otherwise, you'd just wake up sticky, or the whole platform would be covered in this sugary nectar. Even a squirrel running around there. Okay. While I was driving, this other weeping Burbian caught my eye, mostly for all the red flowers that are now lying on the ground. So what you'll get at this time of year is also little antelopes like duikers who will come and feast on these falling flowers. It's like somebody's thrown rose petals all over here. Beautiful. They're falling down around us here, hitting me. The scientific name brachypetala means short petal, and you can see very nicely with these ones why that is so appropriate. Those are very short petals compared to the stamen, which are those things in the middle. So that is the short-petaled Scotia brachypetala. Okay, and so anyway, I could actually show you the weeping part. That is a drop of nectar that has fallen on my hat. And amongst our brachypetala leaves are tracks for Tumbela coming along the Meshuggah River here, her favourite haunt. Turning into a flower drive now because we have another one of our flowering trees, a tree wisteria, who's got some fresh leaf growth and these beautiful purple flowers. Now, very few left on this one, but they were a flush with this mauvey colour a week or two ago, really standing out. Tree wisteria. My mission for creatures with 4 legs are not actually going wonderfully well. I have found quite a lot with 6 legs that are running over my 2 legs, which is not ideal. They're ants, but why I've stopped is actually for this shongololo. Now, looking at that, you might not think he's a great deal bigger than the one I showed you earlier. However, same finger. Ah! Sorry, there's ants everywhere. Look at them. But anyway, this will be quick. You can see he is enormous. A millipede, giant millipede. He was getting bombarded by the ants, but fortunately for him, he's a pretty impressive guy. That thick armored protection all over him, and lots of legs. Not quite 1,000, but probably in the 200s, and he'll just barge through this leaflet. He's a vegetarian, but just to show what his typical defense is, sorry, if he gets touched, just to not care. They'll normally roll up into a coil, but he doesn't want to do it, so I'll leave him alone. He's getting away from the ants just like I should. More plants. We're just actually on one of the roads that you can see hasn't been driven on since it rained. But we have got some lilies that are about to shoot out here. I would really be lying if I tried to tell you what type of lily. Maybe a tumbleweed, Amacaris. I'd have to wait for the flowers to get an ID because I'm useless at everything else. But yeah, amazing. This sand that's been driven on. These bulbs have just been sitting dormant, and now that the rains have come, that is literally in 2 days, 3 days, that has sprung up, along with all these other green shoots. And some very nice lion tracks coming through this drainage line, but they look, I'm sure, a lot fresher than they actually are, because I see a human's already come to inspect them, so they probably would have been left a day or 2 ago. But yeah, at least 3 adults, probably river pride portion thereof, who have been very absent the last few days. It has 4 legs and it's big. It's an animal. Well, of course it's an animal. It's a mammal. An elephant with its head in the thicket, so we're not going to go any closer. There's a little bit of a distance from the road. We'll check for some more. It has been surprisingly quiet here on the eastern side of the reserve today. Very little going on, even very little signs of game. Maybe going to take them a little while to move back to these areas. Obviously this rain we got wasn't just on Tumbela in our concession, but we did seem to get the lion's share of it. Further south, not as much rain, so I think a lot of those zebras and wildebeest will slowly start making their way here. A lot of fresh elephant droppings, maybe we bump into them. Park pan, once again full of water, and it has a visitor. So another elephant bull. At Meshuggah Dam there were tracks for a big elephant. I was hoping it was going to be Apollo somewhere in the area. He has made a return this winter, spring I guess. It was quite late this year that he came in. Only seen him once, but he is such an amazing elephant. Even though he's broken both of his tusks, you may have read about him in our blogs. So I keep hoping that we're going to bump into him. This is not Apollo, he's far from Apollo. Not only has he got 2 intact tusks, but he's much younger and much, much smaller. I mean, Apollo is an immense beast. And some more Quillers flying past. But nice to see some bulls around coming in and making use of the fresh green shoots. I recently wrote a blog on our website about things I'm afraid of and jokes about frogs, well, not a joke, I'm afraid of frogs and mushrooms. I just want to show you why, one of the many reasons why I don't eat mushrooms. There we go, some wild mushrooms. But why don't I eat them? Because they're growing in a pile of poo. That's right, that's where your mushrooms come from. Elephant dung. Sorry, heard whistling, thought it might have been a wild dog. It is a grey-headed bushshrike. But much like the lily that was growing, I would be lying if I even tried to tell you what type of mushroom this is and if it is edible. There are many that are actually quite edible if you're so inclined. Others that are pretty deadly. So if you don't know, don't try. But it's growing out of poo. Who would want to eat it? Even if it wasn't, who would want to eat it anyway? Oh, he's not playing along, or she. It's a giraffe. But I actually stopped to show you that one instead. That's a flowering tree wisteria, full in flower. Look at how gorgeous this becomes in spring, what limited spring we have. But you're able to just get this mass of flowers growing around it. I'm starting to get some leaves and our giraffes coming out into the open there. Hello. Enjoying the flowering bush willows. I mean, look at that one there. So yeah, the giraffes that would always try and make best use of what is most seasonally abundant have, I think, got lucky this year, because normally after this flowering period there's not a great deal of leaves to eat, so they tend to concentrate around the drainage lines and riverbeds and eat the far less nutritious evergreens. But our deciduous trees are all going to start leafing and budding now, so they're not going to have to eat rubbish this year. That's why they look so happy, even though she's got a long face. Oh, I'm sure you haven't missed those jokes. Oh, they have woken. We've got a dazzle of zebras and then a congress of baboons making their way along Jackal's Flay towards the banks of the Mashut, and they're going to go and find some flowering trees, I'm sure. He's making more babies. Still hear the baboons in the background. A little dazzle of zebras. They're looking cleaner. I always like after a first big downpour of the wet season, because the iron oxides in the soil that have been staining them brown get washed away. So you actually have some slightly white zebras for a short while. And synchronized pooping. There we go. We've found the area in which they are. Little implausibility of slightly muddied wildebeest that have obviously been rolling around or sleeping on the sides and getting dirty. My last bit of post-rain thing. But this little shrub in the middle here, we call that a ivy grape. I'm sorry, I do not know the Latin name or scientific name. But you can see how the elephants have used the conditions after the rain and the soil is soft to just dig up all around it. The bush itself has not been touched, but there are some nice, juicy, nutritious, nutrient-rich, I guess that is the same as nutritious, bulbs or tubers at the end of their roots, and the elephants are digging them up for that. I've been driving for a couple hundred meters now, and this herd has gone to town en route. Almost every bush willow, ivy grape, and even other things that they don't normally seem to touch have been dug up. It's just diggings everywhere. And it seems as though I may have broken my camera on my phone, so I'm back. But sorry, the reason that the elephants do this is that the ground is now nice and soft following the rain. So it's much easier to use their legs and their trunks to dig deeper into the soil to get to those roots and bulbs that are otherwise more difficult to get. I mean, elephants are so powerful and have such big appendages that they can use them to scoop up anything. Well, maybe not a gold mine or a diamond mine, but you know, things that they actually need, like roots. They can use it, their feet. But yeah, this herd has come through here probably over a couple of days. Some of the diggings look a little older, but really just gone to town. Just come across something that may be a little disturbing. It is a dead baby zebra. Doesn't seem as though anybody has come and eaten this thing. Ow! Thorns. And this poor little chap. He's had his eyes picked out by some birds of prey. A very young one. And stranger, the second one that's been reported in the last couple of days. And our trackers were out the other day and found one on our access road. This is also on the sand part of the access road, not far from the camp. There's no sign of physical injury or the guy that found it suggested that maybe a stallion had kicked it to death. But I would have imagined that if that were the case, with the biting and the kicking that goes on, and this does happen in the zebra world, that this guy would have been battered and bruised. Not quite sure what could have actually happened to this chap. But yeah, with cloudy conditions like we have now, the vultures have not been circling yet, but it won't take them long to pick up on the presence of this. Maybe an eagle, a battalier or something had come in and pecked at the eyes, got the easy to access protein, but it's now just been left lying strangely over a branch. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. We are coming to an end of this episode of a solo soap safari. The big game has not been playing along today, but I hope that this has showed you that it's not all about the big game, and this change of season now from the dry periods to the wet periods provides a huge amount for us to see and enjoy, and it has been absolutely great being out there just looking at the changes that have taken place only 3 days after our rainfall. So hope you enjoyed. Keep watching. We will keep trying to bring these to you as often as we can. And oh, there goes a gabbard goshawk. But yeah, over the coming weeks, I'm sure you're going to see very quickly how this change is going to take place from the brown, still generally brown surrounds, to something very green and very lush. But until that time, you'll take care of yourselves. Hope that you're all still doing very well, and we hope to see you in person this side very soon. Until then, take care. Cheers.